Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Digital Evidence and Law Enforcement. Today we'll be addressing the critical role digital evidence in modern law enforcement investigations. We're excited to have you join us today as we explore the intricacies of collecting, analyzing, and managing digital evidence in today's fast-paced world. We have an extremely knowledgeable and experienced guest speaker with us today, and we want to thank the International Association of Property and Evidence, which most of us know as IAPE, for helping to put together this webinar and providing our guest speaker. For those of you who don't know, this year marks IAPE's 30th anniversary. IAPE has been teaching property and evidence best practices since 1983, and they have instructed well over 25,000 property and evidence professionals throughout the United States and Canada. IAPE offers 2- and 3-day training classes on property and evidence handling best practices. If you work in an evidence room or supervise evidence staff, IAPE provides the gold standard in training to ensure your staff are utilizing best practices. And not only does IAPE provide fantastic training, they also offer a huge assortment of resources on their website, including their best practice standards guide, training manuals, SOPs from agencies all around the country, and so much more. You can find all of these resources on their upcoming training calendar on their website at iape.org. And I am Steve Paxton. I'm recently retired from law enforcement after, excuse me there, I lost my slide here, stand by. Jump ahead here. Apologize for that. My name is Steve Paxton, and I am a recently retired law enforcement officer after working 26 years as a police officer and detective. The last 12 years I spent managing a 4-person digital forensics unit and working with various digital evidence management systems. And after I retired from law enforcement, I jumped over to FileOnQ to begin working for them. FileOnQ is a public safety solutions company, and we've been in business since 1996, and we work with nearly 400 public safety organizations throughout North America. We offer several evidence management solutions that work together as an integrated platform. Now, you can use our systems separately, but they become even more powerful when you bring them together. And this includes our DigitalOnQ digital evidence management system, which we're talking about digital evidence today. So this is our solution for managing digital evidence at police departments. We also have our EvidenceOnQ system, which I am really sorry, my slides are all mixed up here. I'm going to fix that real quick here, stand by. All right, I don't know what is going on with my slideshow. I'm really sorry about that. Stand by just a sec here. I think it's stuck, is what's happening here. Okay, really apologize for that. So we have separate systems here, and let me just jump back to what I was saying about that. We have our DigitalOnQ system, which I mentioned. We also have our EvidenceOnQ evidence management system. That's our physical evidence management system that's being used throughout the United States in lots of different property rooms. We also have FoundDrop, which is our lost and found, stolen property, recovered property solution. FoundDrop helps unite lost and stolen property with their owners. And that's a big pain point for many police departments, and it does so much more than that too. And then finally, we also have our quartermaster system, which helps police departments and even fire departments, agencies manage their assets and inventory. So if you want to manage all that equipment for your officers, or even the equipment that's going into cars and patrol cars or fire trucks, quartermaster can help you do that. You can find out all that information on our website at fileonq.com. And then before we jump over to our webinar, I want to mention an upcoming webinar on our DigitalOnQ platform. If you're an agency struggling to manage your digital evidence or don't have a digital evidence system in place at all, this is a webinar you definitely want to check out. It's called Take Control of Your Digital Evidence with DigitalOnQ. And it's going to be held on June 1st at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, so be sure to check the time wherever you're at in the United States. We'll be sending more information about this webinar after today's webinar, and we definitely would love for you to join us. And then finally, just know that everyone here is muted for privacy. We understand you may have some questions, so feel free to share those questions with us in the GoToMeeting control panel. We have several IAP board members and others standing by to answer questions as they come in. The other thing too is we will take some questions at the end of today's presentation. So depending on how many questions we get and how much time we have left, we'll definitely capture some of those questions and try to answer them at the very end of Alexa's presentation. So our guest speaker is Alexis Grockmal, and she will be providing valuable insights into the complexities of digital evidence, including the legal implications that law enforcement officers and legal professionals should consider. Whether you're a digital forensics examiner, a law enforcement officer, or a legal professional, this webinar will equip you with practical strategies for navigating the challenges of digital evidence in contemporary investigations. You should also gain a deeper understanding of the best practices for gathering and analyzing digital evidence and how to ensure that your digital evidence is admissible in court. Alexis has 17 years of experience in law enforcement and has been certified member of IEPF as a property and evidence specialist since 2020. Alexis serves as an administrative officer with a specialization in property and evidence management, as well as being a digital evidence specialist. Her current roles include property and evidence manager, property safety IT, and public information officer. She's also managed various other departments throughout her career, gaining valuable experience in asset forfeiture, records management, and accreditation. Now, if that weren't enough, Alexis earned a bachelor's degree in emergency management with a minor in homeland security from Eastern Kentucky University. She also holds a master's degree in cybersecurity and networking from Old Dominion University and is currently pursuing a PhD in cybersecurity. Her research focuses on challenges faced by law enforcement in collecting and using digital evidence in cybercrime investigations. Before I turn it over to Alexis, I want to thank Joe Latta, who is here with us today. He's the executive director and lead instructor for joining us. We also have with us Rick Meadows, Ellen Spain, Hope Martin from IAPE, and we'll be turning it over to you, Joe, at the end of the presentation to say a few words. And with that, I think we're ready to pass it along to Alexis. Hopefully you won't have the same challenges that I had with my presentation. Alexis, are you there?
I'm there. Thank you, Steve, for that introduction. How is everybody today? Hopefully doing well. And I want to welcome everyone today to the webinar. So we're going to be discussing one of the most critical and pressing topics in modern law enforcement. Digital evidence, with the rapid advancement of technology and the investigation and prosecution of those crimes, is heavily reliant on digital evidence, which has created new challenges as well as complexities for law enforcement agencies worldwide. So our goal in this webinar is to help you navigate these complexities and provide you with some tools, maybe a little bit of knowledge, and necessary to effectively collect, preserve, and analyze digital evidence. We will cover some topics, including digital evidence commonly encountered, the legal framework that's surrounding this collection, as well as the digital evidence and the best practices for managing digital evidence, as well as the admissibility in court proceedings. So whether you're a seasoned law enforcement professional or just starting out in the field, I think this webinar will help you to design as well as provide insights that practically help in the tips and to connect the successful investigation, as well as uphold the rules that law of digital age. So let's get started with that. And let's see, the outline today is going to be in our presentation is that introduction to that digital evidence, those importances, the investigation strategies. We want to also look at the techniques that we use for analyzing digital evidence, and then that collection and preservation of digital evidence. There's also obviously the legal considerations that we have to look at with our jobs for digital evidence investigations, and then maybe some best practices for working with digital evidence. So as we will discuss in this management of digital evidence, this can be complex, right? Challenging at times. And we'd like to know that to get a sense of how many of our audience members have had experience with managing digital evidence. So we have some poll questions below that you'll see that are what is level of familiarity with digital evidence. Are you very familiar, somewhat, not familiar? And then also we're curious as well if you've ever attended one of our IEP 2-day courses. So let's take a moment to answer those questions and we'll share the results with you.
Awesome, Alexis. This is Craig, everyone. I'm going to launch this poll for everyone. You're going to be able to interact with it right on your screen. So I'm going to bring up that first poll and you can just interact and we'll get some results and kind of get a feel for if you're very familiar or somewhat familiar or not familiar at all with your digital evidence. So it looks like about 50% of you have chimed in and some of you are thinking about it, and I'm sure. I'll let it go a little bit longer and then I'm going to share those results with everyone. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll out now, and I'm going to share those results with everyone. All right, and so it looks like 31% are very familiar, 57% are somewhat familiar, and we have about 12% they're not familiar at all. So great to have everyone from a very broad spectrum of experience out there. And then I think there's one more poll. Go ahead, Alexis.
No, I was going to say that's great to know, and I like hearing that because this helps me kind of understand where we're at with our audience. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep, awesome. And then the last poll here is going to be an easy one. And it's just if you ever attended an IEP class, like to get the idea of people that out there that have actually attended the class and have benefited from it. And well, it's looking like a lot of you have. So let everybody chime in here. About 70%. Okay, I am going to close that poll out and share those results with everyone. All right, so here we go. Drum roll, please. And it looks like 66% of you have actually taken part in an IEP class, which is fantastic. And those of you that haven't, highly recommend it. It's an excellent class. So, all right, that's it.
All right. So we'll move on to what is digital evidence? This is a question that, we all kind of think we know or we understand. There's the textbook aspect of it. But if we look at digital evidence as defined, right, as any information that's stored, transmitted in that digital format, which can be used in evidence in legal proceedings. We can see this evidence to include maybe electronic documents, emails, text messages, social media posts, images, possibly audio recordings, video recordings, computer files, or any other data that may be stored or transmitted in some type of digital form. So digital evidence is often used in criminal investigations, obviously civil litigation, and other legal proceedings to prove, disprove facts related to a case, similar that we do with physical evidence, right, on our day-to-day basis. It also can be collected in a variety of sources. We are all familiar with probably having, picking up desktop computers, maybe mobile devices, other like tablets, laptops, those types of things. Even in digital cameras, we're seeing a lot more of that aspect as well. And then any other types of electronic devices. I know everybody has a stockpile, probably cell phones in their property and evidence rooms. So in order for these digital evidence to be admissible in court, we need to look at it must be collected and preserved in a manner that ensures the authenticity, the integrity of it, and then the reliability of it. That includes with that data that we're going to gather from that investigation and doing those toolkits. So the expertise of maybe trained professionals who are familiar with the digital forensic procedures or those best practices obviously is where we want to look at getting that information from, and that way that admissibility aspect for court. So electronic evidence, it can be direct or indirect. So let's kind of look at a dive into that. So digital evidence, as we stated, is a criminal component of many criminal investigations as we're moving into this modernization, right? So not all digital evidence is created equal, I like to say. Some evidence may be directly support a fact or an issue in a case, while others may require some interpretation or inference to establish maybe the connection between that digital evidence and then what we got going on with our actual investigation. So in the context of digital evidence, we need to look at as two types of evidence. That's that direct and indirect. So understanding these differences, this types of evidence can be crucial in building that strong case that's presenting that argument, that persuasive evidence that we're going to take to court. So let's look at direct and indirect and how that can impact the investigation. So direct electronic evidence and digital evidence is directly proves a fact without requiring any inference or interpretation. This type of evidence could be a digital file or a communication that explicitly and clearly supports a fact in that case, such as perhaps an email, a text message, surveillance video. It's typically considered strong evidence that can be highly persuasive in a court proceeding. That indirect electronic evidence, on the other hand, that's a little more challenging, right? That digital evidence that requires that interpretation or inference that does not always support the fact right away. We have to tie it in maybe by bringing other aspects into the investigation that will gather that information and that evidence. This is obviously relies on that circumstantial evidence, that chain of reasoning to establish the connection with the actual case. The examples of this we've seen are that metadata that we collect when we look at files and information, login records on devices, or deleted files. That indirect requires a little bit more expert analysis, which can be a little bit more challenging for that interpretation or in that court proceeding references. Steve, do you want to have anything to add to that, maybe about?
Yeah, the example you gave for direct evidence was great. Surveillance video is a good example of that, where you have the suspect or person of interest. Indirect evidence, we've had cases I've involved in where cell phone records puts a person of interest in an area, and it's just a piece of the puzzle, investigative puzzle. We've also collected video of suspects who have traveled across town or even across the county. You get video from a bus and they travel from here to there, and then from there you get video across the street of the restaurant. And so you have them kind of moving to the crime scene, but you don't actually have them at the crime scene. So that's kind of an example of indirect evidence.
Yeah, that was perfect. That was great examples. And we see a lot of that now. And it's good to put those in those two categories. So if you're looking at obviously that management piece, right? So we've established what indirect, direct evidence is, and then we look at that evidence management process of the collecting, storing, preserving, maintaining that digital evidence, and for that legal proceeding, right? That includes our documents, our photos, our videos, our audio recordings. Steve just said you gather video surveillance CCTV from this station, gas station, or this location, bank records. The goal of that management aspect is ensure that the evidence is handled and stored properly so that the authenticity and the integrity are maintained for that court proceeding or that legal proceeding. So when we look at proper evidence management, we're protecting the chain of custody with that evidence, as well as the documentation of the movement of that evidence that is time collected and for that presentation in court. So evidence management is one of those functions of law enforcement that forensic laboratories and other organizations involved in of that collection. So we need to have those practices to help ensure that this justice is served for those individuals and that we're maintaining that chain of custody. Even though it's digital and we think of that physical piece of like evidence that we grab and take, there's that digital component to it that we need to keep that management log and make sure that we're doing that with. And some great resources that are free that I always turn to, obviously, is our National Institute of Justice. They do a really great job of putting together some information for law enforcement, and they do some webinar training as well that's related, that's helpful. One of my, it's in my bookshelf, it's weared out, is the Foundations of Digital Evidence by George Paul. Does a fantastic job. And then another book that is pretty worn out on my desk is Digital Evidence Computer Crime. It's a great reference point, and you could pick those up fairly cheap, and they really do have some great information related to them. And then the SANS Institute is another that does some phenomenal training that's related to digital evidence, and just some really great references for evidence management and doing that digital collection. So if we look at the sources of digital evidence, we're going to look at the physical media, the digital objects, and then digital images, and then the law enforcement component. So those are the four types that we consider. So the physical media encompasses those hard drives that we talked about, the computers, mobile devices, USB, CD, DVD, right? The digital files are those digital evidences copied from those physical media or maybe other systems, include remote at this point, obviously our cloud-based systems that are moving into the realm. So those are the items that we're seizing and that are going to be brought in for those court proceedings and be put in for management. Other digital objects include those broad range of, like, not the normal form of files or that online account that we might be getting information from, social media accounts, email accounts, those types of things. And then finally, we have our law enforcement generated evidence, right? So that's our body worn cameras, our in-car video, maybe electronic records that maybe consist of both a physical component as well as a digital data component. So everybody likes to know, like, where does evidence reside, right? Where does a variety of evidence resides in location devices? Depending on the nature of the case and the type of evidence that's involved, some common locations where digital evidence can be found include obviously computer hard drives, right? They're stored on computers, other digital devices such as smartphones, tablets, or cameras. Then we have that cloud storage component that we see store data on remote servers, such as those provided by cloud storage services like Google Drive, Dropbox. Digital evidence be found even AWS, and then you have the 365 aspect as well. So then we have social media accounts, Facebook, our Twitter, or Instagram. These are all contain that digital evidence of posts, messages, photos, or videos, and even chat logs, right? And then we have our email servers that are also going to contain information, that metadata attachments that may be sent, or messages that have been transpired. The networking devices are another great component and have so much data that you can collect, and that's going to be our routers, our switches, and other network devices that contain such as those logs of internet activity, IP addresses, MAC addresses, all those types of information. Yeah, let's see. Yeah. And I referenced here Slackspace. So, and Slackspace is allocated file, but it's not used to internally fragmentation. I know I'm talking a little bit very like information technology aspect here, but this is something that a forensic examiner would look at for that unallocated space that it can be found in digital aspects. So what evidence resides in digital investigations? I think we need to look at all layers of communication, right? So our communication protocol stack, if you've ever heard, is we have our application layer, our transport layer, and our network layer. The application layer, it typically deals with the protocols of or formats that we see with HTTP, so our hypertext transfer protocol. We have our file transfer protocol, and then our simple mail. So evidence that these layers can include, typically it's going to be your web pages, your emails, your documents, like we said, our social media posts, and file exchanges through application software programs or apps. And then you have your transport layer that is providing that end-to-end communication between applications. So you have the TCP, the transmission control, which provides that reliable data. That's the evidence layer of the connection logs that we talked about earlier with network. And it's going to be our data related to that transmission between our ISPs and the actual web platforms. Then we have like our network layer, which is our routing services. It's going to be our internet protocol. So that's where we're getting some data packets maybe sent that has information related to the host, which would be our suspect maybe, or something like that. We're looking at what type of information that they're transferring. And then we also have the IP address range. So we can look up that information to gather back when we're conducting search warrants and things of that nature. Trying to figure out information that they may have sent or websites and stuff they're looking at. So another component that is that access, right? Least privilege and auditing and file hashing. And this is something that a DIM system, when I relate to file hashing, is going to be, and we'll talk about it later, but it's going to be, for your agency and those court proceedings is going to be very important. So the three elements that make up access control is identification, authentication, and authorization. This is very important when we look at the evidence management component for how, as an agency, we are controlling who has access to these types of things. So we need to look at least privilege aspect, which can be done through most agencies have Active Directory or maybe a group policy within their network. So this is something that if you've not involved your information technology staff and you're collecting this type of data, we need to look at and that least privilege aspect of, with that management piece of who has access of looking at that data. And then we want to obviously make sure we have auditing turned on so we can control the access control of who's going in. And then if we need to look at, provide to court, maybe for an attorney that's, wants to know if that file has been accessed by somebody else or anything of that nature. And that's when that file hashing comes in to be really important in discovery of evidence. So, and I think, Steve, you're really familiar a lot more than I am with file hashing, if you want to explain it a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, these are all really important aspects of any digital evidence management system. So least privilege, when we talk about, access control of user access and putting them into group level access so that you can restrict that for business only needing. And then auditing, another way to look at that is chain of custody and being able to show, just like with your physical evidence, who has had access and what access to your evidence. And we're talking about viewing, downloading, sharing, printing, all those different things that are access related. And then file hashing kind of goes hand in hand with chain of custody. It really is how we can ensure that our evidence hasn't changed and show that it hasn't changed. So it's an algorithm that's run over the evidence as it's ingested, and it becomes like a unique digital fingerprint. So it produces a unique string of characters that are specific to the file, to every single file. So if you're uploading hundreds of photos, every single one of those will have a specific hash. And if that hash, if the file, I should say, changes in any way, I mean at all. So if you have a photograph and a single pixel changes, or if you had a 10,000 Word document and one single letter was deleted, visually you wouldn't know that that happened. And there'd be no way for the court or for prosecutors or anybody to really know that that change has happened. But with file hashing, it'll completely change the file hash. And so that's a part of how we ensure image integrity or file integrity with our digital evidence management system. So any DEMS, good DEMS is going to have those built into them.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, that's imperative in case, right? To make sure that we can 100% say that that file has not been manipulated, has not been altered in any form, fashion as we move forward in court proceedings. So file hashing is one of those moving into that digital modernization. It's very important to have in your toolkit. So.
Yeah, it's come up for me several times in court, Alexis. I've been asked by defense as an investigator, how do we know that your video that you recovered 3 years ago hasn't changed? How do we know that, detective? And it's a kind of a gotcha question, but it's very easy to answer if you have a DEMS, because you just show them the file hash and it's easy to prove.
Right. Yep. And like you said, it's that digital fingerprint, right? And we all understand that, and that chain of custody, that we can 100% say that evidence came in the exact same way and has not been manipulated in any form, fashion. So thanks, I appreciate that, Steve. So now we're assessing the case, right? The nature of the case, the civics of the case, type of evidence, the operating system. We're looking at all these aspects of things when we collect evidence. And my department was having, a large issue with this. So I created them a little checklist, right? So give them that systematic approach to collection. So when you look at that, of like what to take, what do we need to take? So we need to acquire evidence, right, in digital cases. So we need to establish chain of custody. So I have them, provide them with like a checklist to look at the evidence. What do we have? What are we trying to prove in that case? And then what is going to be needed for the court proceedings? What can we get actually, transport the evidence to the lab to get done? Do we need to secure it? So just looking at from that perspective, we need to complete our evidence form, our electronic entry, right? So when we collect evidence, how we're going to transfer that evidence to the lab. That's one of the things we need to know. We need to know if the evidence needs to be in an approved secure container, right? Should we need to prepare anything additional for that workstation to be analyzed? Should the evidence need to be returned in a certain manner? And then how we're going to collect that evidence. Digital evidence is volatile and easily can it be altered or destroyed in transportation in that movement? One of the things like my detectives have always asked me is like, hey, do we really need this big box, desktop computer? And I'm like, yeah, we kind of do, because there might be some components to it. But yeah, is most of the information going to be on that hard drive? Yeah, but do you see any external hard drives laying around, USBs? Hey, what kind of power supply does it need? Make sure you get all that stuff with the actual device as well. And then make sure, obviously, that we're making good notes of where it was located. Was there anything else with the evidence when we collected it? That type of thing. So packaging and storage, that's evolved a lot over the last couple of years. So we're starting to see, obviously, Faraday bags and things of that nature when we do this type of packaging. So in our investigation, the several types of packaging might need to protect and preserve that evidence. And what we are typically seeing and moving into is that static evidence packaging bags. So we're going to see that in a separate storage device or media. So we want to separate those things, the CD, DVD, USB drive, and then we're going to approach it to ensure that the evidence is preserved or analyzed properly by having it in a proper kind of static packaging. And then we have that live evidence packaging. That's capturing and preserving that data. So when we say live evidence, that we need to get that process, it's live system. It's a live evidence packaging. So we need to, not possibly don't shut anything down. There might need information on it that we need to get off of it right away. And then we have the mobile aspect, and that's going to be like your cell phones, your tablets, that type of thing. And we're going to use, specialized packing for those as well, like our Faraday bags or signal blocking boxes to prevent any type of remote wiping or alteration of the data. And I have an example of two of the bags here that have power supplies, because that's another component, making sure that we keep a lot of those devices powered on. And then a Faraday box is also, if you're actually working on a device, you can put those in the box and it'll actually help with that aspect of keeping any transmission. And then the cloud storage packaging, that sounds kind of funny because you're like cloud storage, but it's an aspect of like tools that we have to do for the software and collection, which that would be obviously a forensic investigator would have to handle. And then there's network evidence packaging. So you're going to look at your, as well, you're going to have somebody on site that's able to do network analysis tools to hardware to capture the data or that information that we need to get off of it. So everyone always asks you about storage, right? Because we talk about cloud storage and we talk about the different aspects in today's world. So an essential aspect for agencies to focus on is they explore these various options, right? They include cloud platforms, or if they're going to do local area storage, which I have two example pictures here. And actually one of these is my system. The one on the left is one of my systems that I built. And this is, it's called a SAN, or a storage area network. It's a specialized network architecture that provides high-speed access to data, such as like a disk array, which is going to be the gray, if you can kind of see it in the picture. And then it's basically a network storage that is able to be connected for storage devices to be connected over a network solely for that storage traffic. So SANs provide, like I said, that high-speed connectivity, probably what you see like your file when you click on and you save things to a drive or something of that nature on your agency's network drive. So it does a lot of, it usually uses features such as like RAID or snapshotting, and it does replication aspects too. So digital evidence has grown, right? We're seeing, to give you an example, the setup that I have there on the left is about 30 terabytes, if I remember right. And it was filled up in about a year. Pictures, video, all that data just takes up so much storage. And most good, significant, well, I should say, an agency should look at, if they're looking at doing storage components, they need between 20 to 200 terabytes. And giving an example of this, I worked with another agency not too long ago that just recently added 150 terabytes, and in 8 months they already filled that up. So storage is going to be a long term, that if your agency, you work with your command staff, you need to look at a long-term storage that's going to be able to be backed up and secured, like we talked about with the access control, least privilege aspect with these network storages. So, so an example, and I brought it up, is a 30 terabyte storage. I think average, they say, will last most departments between 1.5 years to 2 years if you're a mid-level size agency. The picture on the right is 1,000 petabyte, and that's an agency that I worked with not too long ago. And if anybody's never even heard it, it's unheard of now to hear a petabyte most of the time, but because most people have moved to cloud. But that agency, they filled that up in 3 years. So when we look at cloud platform versus local storage, a lot of departments ask, what is the difference? What is the benefits, right? So we look at scalability, accessibility, cost effectiveness. That's going to be your cloud, right? Cloud platforms are providing that limitless storage capacity, and then that's going to be able still to control that least privilege aspect as well. When you look at your SANs, the benefits are going to be your higher speed connectivity. You're going to get that fast, reliable access. You're also going to have advanced features such as the RAID, the snapshotting that I talked about earlier. And then you have that centralized management aspect of it. So you're going to have able to allocate the resources for the server or applications that you may be needing. So I don't really tell anyone, particularly cloud or local. It really depends on your agency and your information technology staff, where the direction they want to go. But when you're looking at storage components, these are questions that you need to ask yourself, especially with cost. So as I said, storage, access, and retention. So we're all challenges that we're being faced with, right? These are dealing with digital evidence, is the volume. We're getting the volume is spread across multiple devices. So you got these servers, these clouds, you're collecting, you're preserving, you're analyzing these large volumes of digital evidence. And then we have that complexity piece, right? So it's that knowledge or that training that we need, that expertise to know what we're looking at. And then we have the encryption aspect that as well. It's making it difficult to get into these or devices or access or analyze that data. I know a lot of departments are looking at, trying to with Celebrate and Gray Key and some of these other aspects to get into cell phones, right? And then we have that jurisdictional aspect. So we have, the information may not be stored or transmitted across jurisdictions. We've ran complexity with legal issues, maybe with sharing certain information. So these are all things that we recommend that you try to get together with your local agencies and work out with those aspects of, maybe accessing of some of their digital toolkits and being able to gather information as well as get into collecting evidence, like I was saying, that using maybe that Celebrate or that Gray Key aspect, or maybe a detective is fairly familiar with gathering information from a computer or that aspect. And then we have that privacy aspect as well as another challenge for law enforcement, that personal or sensitive information that's protected by privacy laws. So we have to care and concern with that, right, with that collection and storage of the analysis of it. And then the validity or the digital evidence could be easily altered or destroyed if it's not collected or preserved properly. So it's another challenge that law enforcement is feeling in this modernization age that we're moving into. So I think it's time for another poll. Craig, if you can take the lead.
Yes, be happy to. So I'm going to pull another poll up. It's the same as before. And I also wanted to share something with everyone. We get a number of questions about the great books that Alexis shared earlier. I actually provided some links in the chat area. There should be a chat option for everyone to be able to look at that. And so there's some links in there to Amazon. If you want to get somewhere else, you can, but you'll have the name of it. And I'll also include that in an email that we going out tomorrow to everyone on those books that she recommended. All right, we're gonna bring up this poll for everyone. And this is which challenges have you faced when dealing with your digital evidence? So we'll let everybody kind of think about that and see what their greatest challenges are. Pick the top one. I should have taken a poll of a guess of which one this was internally, but I'm curious where this comes out. All right, it looks like about 50% of you have chimed in. A little bit harder on this one to think about this one. Let it go a little bit longer. Okay. All right, I think I'm going to share those results there. It looks like a few of you are still coming, so I'll hold on a second. I don't want to rush everyone. All right, looks like we've got everyone. Okay, I'm going to share those results. So our number one is handling and preserving digital evidence. That would have been my guess. And then number two is analyzing and interpreting digital evidence at 22%. And then your third is locating and acquiring digital evidence. And then presenting it in court was the lowest, and then other, which you don't have an option to fill in the other, but I'd be very curious what that other is. So if you guys want to share that in the chat, that'd be fun to see that. All right, one more poll, hide those results, and I am going to launch the last poll here. And this is what other resources or support do you need to improve your skills in digital evidence handling? So it'd be good to know, to see what is needed out there, and maybe we can provide a class down the road on this. Okay, about almost pushing 50% of you have pulled in. Let it go a little longer. Okay, almost there. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close this poll out and share those results with everyone. So here we go. So our top one is continuing education opportunities. So, and then number two would have been training on forensic software at 37%. And then the third one is collaborating with your forensic experts at 22%. And then 17% came in at access to a digital forensic laboratory. And then we got some others at 5%. All right, thanks everyone. Good results. Alexis, back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, that's some great data there. So, and I would totally agree that handling and preserving is a lot of the questions that I get, right? Locating, we have that complexity too. Like I brought up, not everybody thinks about like the router and what data you can find on there, and then what other aspects. And then with the resources, yeah, continuing education opportunities is key. If that's just you making connections with maybe even like your local universities, or even reaching out to your state lab and seeing if maybe they provide some type of training. These are all things that I would recommend. And to be brutally honest, that's how I started out. I just went and I met with a local university, and one of the professors there helped me out and got me some information when I was first looking at some cyber options. So, right. So retention. We all love retention, right? We all have all those records we wish we could just get rid of, or all that evidence we could just get rid of. So we have a lot of retention laws, and it's good to know those policies and procedures that clearly define that role of collection, that dissemination, the access, and then ultimately, hopefully, eventually, that destruction. So what's that mean for us in that law enforcement management aspects? It's that the extraction capabilities that we're able to do, that access of data to digital devices, and then training the personnel with the right solutions for actually being able to do all of those aspects. So managing data to protect the chain of evidence, ensure compliance, it's even more important than we said today, right? And having, we've mentioned a digital evidence management system. In my personal opinion, a DIM system is key. Agencies must manage digital evidence the same way they manage the physical evidence. They, with the procedures in place to maintain that data integrity and a clear process to get the right information to the right team members when it's needed. And I think by having that DIM system, they just can protect and manage that data to process and simplify discovery, handle the retention laws, the policy laws, and then also to comply with any expungement requirements that may be needed. I mean, I know probably many of us have just USBs everywhere, right? Or you have external hard drives. So another aspect of DIM that does really help in that capacity is you have all that evidence in one location and it's all being managed in one area. So we have our legal considerations as well. I put a couple of case that up there that are relevant. Obviously, you have to look at your state and depend on, but these are some great ones. Katz versus United States. That's that whole privacy aspect. Our United States versus Carpenter is that cell phone collection of data by law enforcement related to Fourth Amendment. And then we have Maryland versus King, which is another great one with DNA evidence related of taking those samples and things of that nature, but it also has it had a digital component as well. And then Riley versus California, another cell phone incident to arrest. These are all great to look at for legal considerations and also will help kind of with that admissibility, privacy, the discovery aspects that we all look at when we go for court proceedings. So why is this all important, right? Why is digital evidence so important? These are some other great cases that show digital evidence was key in each one of these. The United States versus Microsoft, I know that's more of like a civil side, but it was huge. They, with digital evidence, and then United States versus Tarsonavi, which I might have said that wrong, but that was related to that Boston Marathon bombings. And then we have People versus Scott Peterson. Everybody's pretty familiar with that case. And then we also have United States versus Ross Albright. So these are great. Digital evidence were key in these cases, and they really brought evidence to the table that was able to, for that finalization of data that was, for the actual case proceedings, it was evidence that was brought to trial that really was beneficial in the case and pointed in another direction to be able to find more evidence. So unfortunately, digital evidence at times we collect so much of it and some of it may not be needed, but then there might be that one key component or that one piece that just like with physical evidence that really breaks a case. So thanks for joining me today for this webinar on the complexities. We hope that the information and insights we've shared are helpful for you. Maybe bring up more questions and that you're confident in your ability to handle maybe a little bit better or know what to look for. And I just want to emphasize the importance of staying up to date with this emerging technology, the legal developments related to it, and then the pace of technology and advancement that it's not showing signs of slowing down. And it's more important than ever to continuously learn and adapt to the challenges that we're seeing with technology. And we'd like to thank our friends at File on Q for hosting this webinar. And I appreciate my fellow IAP board members for their valuable contributions with helping in the chat and everything. And like I said, we hope you found this webinar informative and engaging. And if you have any other questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me or any of us. My information is on the digital card up there. It can be accessed with your phone. If you just want to scan the little QR code, it has my information on there. And once again, thanks for attending this webinar, and I wish you all the best in your future digital investigations. So back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Alexis. That was great, very informative. And we did get a few questions here. Before we jump over to those questions, I do want to mention that we do have some handouts in the GoToMeeting control panel that cover some of this. We have some best practices guide there with lots of resources, a lot of the resources that Alexis mentioned, as well as others. So be sure to grab that before we close this out. And so let's jump over to some questions. We did get some good questions. Alexis, I think you and I will try to field these together. One of them is, you mentioned 30 terabytes a year of storage consumption for the average size agency. Now that's kind of hard because the average size agency can span, any number of officers. Actually, the average size agency is 12 officers, if according to Justice of Bureau statistics, so it's pretty small. And so I guess I just want to mention that that's kind of range a little bit. But the question is, does this include or exclude body-worn camera footage? So that's kind of a tricky one. I'm just going to jump on that real quick, Alexis, and I'll hand it off to you. You know, a lot of body-worn camera vendors provide storage, you know, if you're doing an Axon or WatchGuard system that goes with that system. So that would be part of that solution. And typically you're going to have a good chunk of your body-worn camera video that's recorded is going to drop off and not be retained, right? So, you know, just kind of a rough guess, maybe 70 or 80% of the video that's recorded out there in the field is contact video, right? It's not related to a case. It doesn't get tagged as being held and carried forward. And so that video would be a drop off based on your retention schedule, which could be 90 days or 120 days, however you set that up. But if you are using a body-worn camera system that is not, you know, one of the big ones there, you might be storing your body-worn camera video alongside all of your other evidence. And so it definitely does factor in. I mean, I would say it would easily double your digital evidence if you bring that side by side. So just be aware that you're going to want to set up a retention for that non-case evidence video. You know, you want to keep it long enough, the body-worn camera video long enough so that you can, you know, review complaints and things like that, but there's no real reason to hold on to it indefinitely. What do you think, Alexis?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, and that's something definitely if you don't have retention set up, I highly recommend that you look at that, and because you know you don't need to keep all that data for so long. And I did a quick estimate or calculation here, and so roughly 30 terabytes will hold 666 hours of video. If it's in 4K video, which most of the new like Axon, for example, are, you know, they're moving in that range of that collection. So yeah, retention is key. Just like when we talk about with our property and evidence, you know, you don't need to keep everything forever, right? So same with this, you have to think of it the exact same way that, you know, digital evidence should not be stored for longer than it truly needs to be. But yeah, storage is one of those things that can really eat up a lot if you're not getting rid of things properly.
Okay, great. Another one that's kind of similar to that question is, do you have an idea of the average amount of storage capacity a smaller agency might need? And of course, it's really hard to say. One of the things that we do at File and Queue is we will do a needs analysis just to find out how much video you already have. If you can go back in time and just look at how much you stored already, which might be hard to do. I mean, if you have it on a variety of external media in the property room, that could be challenging. But if you can get kind of an average of how much you've got or how much is coming in, that can help you forecast into the future. But just based on my own just kind of experience, and this is just really rough, if you're a smaller agency, let's say less than 25 officers, and you're just getting started and you realize you need to get a digital evidence management system, and you jump on and you get something like Digital NQ, you would want to plan out for 36 months. You don't want to keep buying storage over and over and over again, right? So I would think about, you know, 5 terabytes probably is a good starting point, and you can do that on premise storage, right, with Digital NQ, or you can actually have that in the cloud. So kind of depends on that. If you're a larger agency, of course, it's gonna grow, and of course, if you're storing body-worn camera video on there, it might actually grow faster too. So, Alexis, what do you think at your agency? What are you noticing size-wise?
Yeah, so our big one is these cell phone downloads, right?
Oh yeah.
So you know, we eat up a lot with that. In fact, the picture you saw, so I just added an additional 45 terabytes to that rack system. And like I said, that it's definitely one of those things you have to look at, but I agree with you, Steve. You know, maybe start a little bit more than you think you might need, because you just don't want to continually have to keep adding, so the cost is incurred. And most SAN devices that I talked about, you know, it's that 20. It starts at 20. That's about what you can get, that minimum. So I recommend starting where a little bit more than you think you're going to need. That's always a good reference. So.
For sure, yeah. Next question. In recent training I was a part of talked briefly about failing to rotate out digital evidence as physical evidence is, same way as physical evidence is, and there are consequences for failing to do so. Do we rotate out digital evidence the same way as, for example, physical evidence? And I think what they might be talking about is retention and purging. And so for sure, you definitely want to have a retention system or a schedule in place, both for your property room and your digital evidence. You know, with our system, Digital on Queue, you can align it with Evidence on Queue so that you're examining and reviewing your retention of both your physical and digital evidence all at the same time. Now, something I'll mention, and Alexis, I'm sure, is even more experienced on this, is that some of your digital evidence actually qualifies as records, right? So in the state I'm in, photographs actually qualify as records, and so they don't really align with digital evidence retention standards in our state. You have to look at what records retentions are for that. So it's a kind of a complicated question, but the short answer is yes, you definitely want to have a not a one-way street of stuff coming in. You want to have a two-way street where stuff's coming in and stuff's going out. I mean, if you've got graffiti photos that are 10 years old and you're on your digital server, that's with no suspect,
Right.
You're wasting a lot of space there in the long run. Go ahead, Alexis.
No, yep. I was just resonating exactly what you said. So definitely needs to be consistency, and it needs to be centralized. So yeah, definitely look at your records retention laws, because you're right, Steve. Virginia is one of those that, and I'm in Virginia, obviously, so that's one that we have to align with as well. So yeah, definitely be centralized in that, and look at your records laws as well.
Okay, I'm gonna just do a couple more here just based on our time. A couple of these, I think we kind of answered the question. There's similar questions. Let's see here. When using a DEM system, how do you address backups for data contained on a particular device, such as a SAN or external hard drive? There's probably a lot more to that question, the intent of that question, than I know here, but your DEM system should be backing everything up. And so that's one of the hallmarks of a good DEM system. So for example, with Digital on Queue, you're gonna have a backup system in place where if it's on premise, it's storing evidence, you know, on a server with a redundancy built in. Or if you're in the cloud, we use CGIS compliant Azure storage. And so there's, of course, redundancy there too. So that is like the sort of one of the basic tenets of a DEM system is having a backup there. So go ahead, Alexis.
Yep, agree. And definitely check with your IT team, like when's it being backed up? What's the schedule? That type of thing. If it's not being backed up, that's concerning, right? Because if it was to die, or you know, in layman's term, right, you're gonna have some issues there. You're gonna lose a lot of important evidence data. So definitely look at backup procedures and make sure that it's being backed up properly.
Okay, keep hanging with me here. I want to just get to a couple more of these questions, and then I want to turn this over to Joe before we close out. So just hang with me, a couple more questions if you guys have the time. We're getting a lot of CDs, DVDs, or discs with surveillance video. That's a real common thing. We upload them to our server, so can we electronically send them for discovery or PDR? Should we still maintain the physical disc? It just seems like we're duplicating work. So yeah, that is a real challenge. So that's where a DEM system really is going to help you out. I don't know what exactly you have for storage at your department, but with a DEM system, you know, it's not just ingesting and storing your digital evidence. It's the full life cycle, right? It allows you to, officers come in, plug in a thumb drive, a phone, drop that disk in the tray, upload that evidence into the system. And then from there, it can be, you know, viewed and accessed by detectives if it moves forward. And then further along, it can be sent over securely to prosecutors. And then finally, if it's eligible, it can be purged. So that's that whole life cycle, right? In terms of retaining the CDs and DVDs, that is my advice to you is that you don't need to hold on to those once they've been uploaded and hashed. But I would also caution you to check with your city or county prosecutor just to make sure there's not something there. I mean, every area is a little different. We didn't, because you're making a duplicate copy, and there's court ruling that says that a copy is a copy, right? And so if it's the same thing, and a DEM system will be sure to pull that up as the same thing, then you don't need to hold on to that. And then finally, you know, remember that when you are impounding physical media, you're creating two records there, evidence records. You know, if officers come in and they impound their thumb drive of photos or surveillance video, you have digital evidence that's now become physical evidence, which complicates your retention. So now you have to, you're filling up your property room with extra stuff. And when it's time to purge all that evidence, you have to physically track down those disks and all that media. And this is why I think every single department has to have a DEM system. I mean, I worked with a department just recently, had 4 officers, and they understood that they needed a system to manage that. Alexis, go ahead.
No, you hit it right nail on the head. You know, you don't want to have physical data and I mean, physical devices and digital. I think it needs to, and we do the same thing with that, is we don't keep both. It's just not, you know, it's not feasible, and it's just kicking up room that doesn't need to be taken up when you actually already have it in the system. So
there's so much here. I mean, it's hard to really cover this in a short time we have. We will send out some answers to some of these other questions, and I think we'll have access to us in our email if you want to follow up with us directly. I want to thank Alexis. You did a great job, Alexis. Packed in a very technical conversation into a short period of time. Good job. And thank IAPE for providing this as well. And Joe, appreciate you. Are you there? Can you jump in and have a few minutes? You want to? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm here. Have you got the slides there?
I do. Here it is.
Folks, I know there's a lot of you have been to our training and are members, but I think we have a lot of people listening today that maybe are not aware of us. And in about 1 minute, and I'll be done. We've been providing training since 1997. As I mentioned earlier today, we've been in every state and every province in Canada. We do a 2-day management. Whether you're the chief or whether you're a new property officer or a volunteer, you'll get something out of the class. That same class is available online. It's about 16 hours. It's just like Netflix. You watch it at your leisure, and you can watch 30 minutes today and 2 hours tomorrow. You don't have to wait for a class to come up. We also have an 8-hour supervisor class. We've done 4 of them so far this year, and I think we have 1 more, and we're starting to schedule a lot of things for next year. We also have a community forum, IAPE Community Forum, International Association for Property Owners. We've added about 1,000 people to that in the last 3 months. Go in and post your questions, share information with other property officer professionals. And one of the other things that we have available for our members is a certified property and evidence specialist. You become a member, you come to a class, you become certified, and that's been recognized all around the world. And when I say all of the evidence custodians at the World Court in The Hague have become certified. So we've got to reach all around the world. And lastly, we put our evidence log out every quarter, and we put our newsletter out every single month, where you can write in, ask a question, and Joe will try to give you an answer. And if I don't know it, I will defer to one of our board members. Next slide, Steve, and we'll be all done. I wanted everybody to see, I've crossed a few out. Every one of those in Marysville, Salem, those were all sold out. We did a class yesterday in Lincoln, and it was almost sold out. We're moving through the year. We're in Pennsylvania, Nevada, Minnesota. I'm sorry, Michigan, Texas. We're going to be there several times. Here in California a couple times. We're going to be in Arkansas. As you can all see, this, I'm not going to read them all to you, but you can see we're all over the country this year. This is our 30th anniversary, and our goal was to do 30 classes, and we've already got more than 30 classes on the schedule. But don't wait, because a lot of these classes have filled up, and I think it's because of COVID. I kept a lot of people back, locked in jail there for a while, and now people are starting to get out. So I really appreciate all of you joining us today. I want to thank Alexis for doing this, and Steve, and the support we get from File on Q. So everybody have a good day, be careful, and hope to see you at a class real soon. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Joe. And we're just closing up here. Just want to remind you of the webinar we got coming up on June 1st, Take Control of Your Digital Evidence. This is basically going to be an extension of today's conversation. So we're just going to kind of take a little bit further. I want to show you Digital on Q. It's a very affordable and powerful solution for your digital evidence. You don't have to spend a bundle to get it. We bend our pricing so that every agency can have it. And so we'll be talking about that on June 1st. So be sure to check in on that. And as we close out, you'll have an opportunity to share how we did and to provide us with some feedback and let us know if you have any suggestions for anything we can do in the future. We're going to try to follow up with you in some of those questions. Also, right now, try to grab those handouts if you haven't, and if you want them, they're still there available before we close out this presentation. And Craig, have I missed anything?
No, Steve, I think you've covered it all. I just wanted to say thank you, Alexis. Thanks for everyone joining us. Have a great week. We look forward to seeing you at a future webinar and the one on June 1st, where we'll get to show our DIMS system to you and continue this conversation a little bit further. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.